Yes, hello. I'm glad to be here and to get the chance to talk about climate impacts on livestock, especially in the most affected areas. And we've already heard quite a lot about it in the earlier lectures. And thank you, Max and Tim, for the bridge. Because in Africa, of course, and other affected countries like Afghanistan and the eastern countries, it's a big problem. And they, of course, are absolutely depending on their animals to survive. And the situation for humans as well as animals in the most affected countries in the global south, more or less, is horrific. So we see the hazards, of course, that threaten livestock as well as humans in these areas are, of course, the atmospheric rise of CO2 as well as the tropospheric rise of ozone. And I will especially look at the effect of temperature rise, of course, and the changes in precipitation, as well as, of course, storm surges do have a very high impact, as well as sea level rise and the consequences for soil salinity. And Dr. Thiam already mentioned that in her speech earlier. So if you look at this graph, I chose that to make it look a bit more academic. So if these hazards playing their role, at the top we first look at feed and water resources. So feed is what, of course, livestock needs to thrive on and to be nurtured with. And of course, feed, as in crops, suffers from water stress and water restriction just as well. So we have plant diseases and pests and pathogens that impact the growth of the crops that the livestock needs to be fed on. As well as, of course, changing climate is also affecting the key pollinators, the key pollinator species. So without them, the growing of the weeds and the crops won't really carry on. We have, with feed and water resources, we have the problem as well, of course, that the animals themselves, they suffer from heat distress. And it's not only heat distress, they are not so capable of getting rid of increased heat via, like we do, sweating. So most of them are covered with fur, and they don't really have much opportunities to exchange their body heat with the surrounding environment, especially if that is very hot. And the change of precipitation patterns or weather changes as well, of course, is threatening the water supply for the livestock. And all together, if we look at that, we have animals that are not properly nurtured, they have not enough food, and they have not enough water. And of course, the consequences are they are more prone to diseases, the morbidity and the mortality is rising, so many more die than under former conditions. So the animal production is really affected, and costs are rising, of course, and the revenues are lowering. This all has effect, of course, as well on the processing and the storage, transport and retailing, but this is not my focus here. The focus is here on the animals and their products, and the products that the people in the most affected areas really rely on to survive. And if, for example, livestock like cows or sheep or goats suffer water distress during gestation, they have less milk, they have a lower quality of milk, it's lower in protein, it's lower in fat, and of course the offspring is born weak most of the times. So here as well, the morbidity of the offspring is higher, more prone to diseases as well, and the mortality of course rises as well. So the people who raise these animals are directly affected, because what they live on is more or less dying before they even can raise it. And if they are able to get animal products because of this chain effect, they have animal products of less quality, of less quantity, so they have less income, and it's a vicious circle for them. This graph is I took from a study called Impacts of Climate Change on the Livestock Food Supply Chain. So that is what this study looks at in total, but I only picked out this part and the effects on animal health and production. There are other academic publications, and the study I just talked about was from 2021, and I found another one. It's a textbook actually, and it's called Emerging Issues in Climate Smart Livestock Production, and it was published this year. And it's very interesting how different the approaches are. I just highlighted a few of the text, parts of the text to emphasize how wrong, in my eyes, the approach in some academic circles still is. So here it says a sustainable rise in livestock production is a requirement for fulfilling the future demands for livestock products. There's nothing wrong with this. And then it needs to be complex and compatible with increasing livestock production practices. So this is contrary to what we've just heard in the lecture before. And even for African or for the affected countries, it wouldn't be a good idea to actually rise livestock production there. And of course there's a philosophy behind that we are overcoming already, because we are heading, and hopefully are very fast heading towards a plant-based diet. But here in this very new textbook it says food base on livestock is complete in all respects, being rich in calories, proteins and lipids that are essential for the ideal growth of the human body. So this is really, I was shocked when I read this. I just had to take this in to make clear on how many wrong paths we are still going on. And there's another chapter out of this textbook which highlights what we shouldn't do. Here it says that it will be manageable to supplement with nutritional and vitamins and minerals and exogenous antioxidants to supply the animals with these supplementations to actually nullify the harmful effects of heat stress. This is not possible. And it's the wrong way anyway to try to go a way of adaptation, mitigation, by putting even more supplementation into the animals at that stage. And they go on and they talk about enhanced milk production, and of course they want to prevent economic losses that incur due to environmental change. But in my eyes, this approach is the wrong road. In the beginning, I had the pastoral grazing livestock on my entrance picture. So I would like to talk a little bit about that, because that would point out why in these areas that we've already heard about, in Senegal, Afghanistan, in East Africa, and all over Africa, and in Eastern Asia as well. In Africa they have these nomads. They live with their animals, they drive them through the countryside, just adapting to the seasonal changes, and they have done that for hundreds of years. So it would be completely wrong to expect them to change that, because they usually only have like a sufficient number of animals that they can handle and feed, and so they're not expanding their business. It's just to support themselves and their families, and to create a little bit of income by selling maybe milk or meat when they have animals slaughtered. So I'm a veterinarian, so I'm happy to be able to talk here in favor of the veterinaries without frontiers as well. I'm not an active member, but I support them, and I think they do a very important work, especially in Eastern Africa. They are active mainly in Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan, Kenya, Somalia, and Uganda. And what they do is not only limited to support and strengthen animal health, but meanwhile it's like a catalog that they really have to support the people there in, first of all, of course, to increase or improve animal health. So they educate local people to become veterinary health assistants, so they can go out to the people that are scattered all over the place, and advise them what needs to be done with the animal to have healthier animals. So it includes like vaccinations and parasite treatment, and feeding management tutorials, and all that. So altogether it's like a bunch of targets that they try to get done. Of course, animal welfare is important, then food hygiene to improve health of the people as well, and under the One Health aspect, to have human health in combination with animal health, and above all, of course, environmental health. This also helps in these regions to lower conflict risks, as we heard before. I mean, if you have to fight around your living resources, you're more likely to fight your neighbor instead of helping him. Estimated 200 million people are actually living this mobile pastoralist life, and they generate food and income for their families, for their communities, and as well they contribute to biodiversity because of the migration. They never exploit an area too much, and of course they fertilize the areas as well when they move on, so the soil can be fertilized by the feces of the animals, and in a way this helps as well climate mitigation. And actually it's a strategy of climate mitigation, but after all we heard today, it doesn't really need to be explained anymore. With water supply going down and feed for the animals is more and more difficult to find. These people will lose their culture and their lives, and it's completely different from what we live over here, and it's completely different what they need to be supported and what we need to do here. So they need to be supported in all the fields that I've just mentioned, for example what Veterinaries Without Frontier do. And this is in German, I couldn't translate it anymore. So looking at this pastoralist nomads, it's more or less one of the most sustainable and environmental friendly forms of livestock farming. They improve the soil quality, improve biodiversity, and they supply the nutrition circles, and so they supply security for the regional supplementation and food, especially in the global south. And hopefully, meanwhile, international institutions and politicians will recognize that. And yeah, as we heard before in all the other lectures, it's time to act now, immediately, and we in the global north are responsible for what is happening in these areas and to these people and to these animals. So we need to support them in a way that they can mitigate to the climate changes, and we have to change our lifestyle and societies to make that happen. Wow. And not to, well, I can't say get fucked.